Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, Hans shares his winding path from college to IB in the Netherlands and eventually Egypt. Listen to hear how he valued international exposure and how he was able to land a position with the private arm of the World Bank before heading off to Tuck for his MBA. Enjoy. All right, Hans, welcome to the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
Great. So it'd be awesome if you could just give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Yeah. Starting at, I'll skip all the irrelevant things, the high school and all that stuff, and growing up, childhood. I went to undergrad at UC Roosevelt, very international program in Middelburg, close to the Belgian border, south of the Netherlands. And 50% of the people are international, so you can do a lot, get foreign credits, get it incorporated. I went to London, LSE, went to Lyon, France, went to UCLA, Los Angeles, got all those credits in the degree. Then went to grad school in Utrecht, got a master's in law and economics, supervision and regulation of markets, and ended up doing some grad internships, international technology and trade associates in Washington, D.C., a consulting firm, oil and gas market consulting, Van Lanschot Bankiers, a wealth management firm in Hilversum, the Netherlands. Then did some trade politics, a brief stint at the Royal Netherlands Embassy in Washington, D.C., and then went to ING, a major financial institute in the Netherlands, Europe, and the US as well, of course. Australia as a major market. But I was on Dutch domestics. I did that for close to 2 years before switching to the IFC, the International Finance Corporation, the private sector branch of the World Bank Group in Egypt. And did MENA at first, then some split happened, some rearrangements, and I ended up with Middle East, Central Asia, and Pakistan, Turkey. And after 2.5 years, I got accepted to Dartmouth Tuck, and I'll start soon, August 8th. So that's where we are.
That's exciting, man. A lot to unpack. Let's actually start all the way back at Roosevelt. So let's go all the way back. Let's go to Roosevelt. Let's hear a little bit about, were you always thinking career in finance or law specifically? It sounds like a really cool program if you were able to go to all those other schools. So how long did you spend in UCLA? How long were you in the other schools? Was it like only one semester or what?
Yeah, I'll take you through it. So to be completely fair and open with you, I wanted to go to the UK after high school. And, I went through the UKIP thing. All your like English listeners will know what that is. You go through all these application portals and stuff. And then my parents, my dad actually went to Nijrode for a lecture one night, a business school, like famous business school in the Netherlands. And he said, hey, I heard about this small liberal arts college all the way down south by the Belgian border. They speak English all day and it's still here. It will be perfect for you. So they kind of, nudged me in the right direction. But I ended up going there for an open day and I liked it a lot. And it was the environment I was looking for, the international exposure I wanted early on. So I went for it. That's how I ended up there. And the London School of Economics was my first summer. I went to London in between the first and second year. In between the second and third, I went to Lyon to learn French. But to be fair, I hung out with the English a lot. So I mean, my French is not that great, but I had an amazing time. I would highly recommend going to Lyon. And Catholic University of Lyon offers a great program. It's so much fun. People from all over the world.
That's cool.
Then I went to UCLA for about half a year. That was my first US experience.
What do you think of that compared to the others?
I guess, like, speaking as a Dutch person, California is a good place to start out at. I think it's culturally very similar. It's just like it's Holland with better weather. I used to say when I was there, like as a joke.
Yeah.
Which is it's more true than you'd say. It's fairly accurate. So I felt very at home. Like yeah, it was like had a profound impact. I started searching ways to go back to the US whenever I could.
Hmm.
So yeah,
And then what do you think, you're majoring in like law, political science, stats and stuff. What made you kind of think, okay, now it's time to go get a law degree, a master's in law rather than, were you thinking at all when you were undergrad, like, hey, I should go into finance right away, or I should get a legal job, or it was pretty I know in Europe it's more common to go straight to the master's.
yeah, indeed. It's very common to go straight to the masters. In fact, you kind of need it too. So I was already thinking of business school in the US, but to get to business school, you need a master's. It's odd. You need a master's to get into the masters, right?
Yeah.
But that's because the countries are not synced in the world yet. But it's the
Yeah.
way it is.
But that was a 3-year program, it looks like, or 2.5 years or something.
Yeah. No, it's not really on paper, but you may be familiar with this. It's quite common in Europe to put your master's thesis on the shelf,
Mm,
so you can do internships. Very often, you need to be a registered student somewhere to intern, like the government, for instance. If you want
right.
to intern in diplomacy at an embassy, you need to be a registered student. So I took advantage of that by making the program a bit longer than it should be.
And so, yeah, and so in terms of like, should I think of it as like the equivalent of Master of Laws is similar to like a JD here in the US?
I think a JD is a bit more intense,
More intense.
generally longer. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then so tell me a little bit about the specifics of like when you started, these internships. What kind of opened your eyes the most? What was, I guess, not the worst experience, but was the kind of like eye-opening of like, I definitely don't want to do that? Or, there's certain things that started piquing your interest. Was it more like the economic finance side? Is that what kind of started guiding you there? Or when did you kind of,
Well, I think like to go back to the UCLA experience, at that point, I decided, okay, I do want to spend like a large um, like segment of life in the US at some point. There was no rush, but that was became a goal. And I started to think like what would be interesting to do. Liberal arts is not very specific, so I need to like get more on point, like become a specialist in something and choose a profession. And I figured diplomacy. I figured maybe I can go become a diplomat and go to the United States and work at one of the consulates in Chicago, New York, or Atlanta, San Francisco, or the embassy in DC. So that sort of became a goal. And while I was chasing that goal, I eventually ended up being an intern at an embassy. So I think I was fairly on track with that. But I met people in DC within the World Bank system, doing development finance work, and that sort of sparked an even greater interest. And yeah, I think that's when I started going down the finance path. That's why I went back to the Netherlands, found a job with ING, who gave me like a shot, even though I had a law degree, and signed up for the CFA program and really dived into finance.
interesting. Yeah. So let's talk about that. So like you're at the embassy, you kind of think, oh, maybe this finance thing's a little more interesting for me. I'm more curious. I want to explore this. So the decision of you're in DC, right?
Yeah, I was in DC. Yeah.
And was it just like, it was an internship, so it was coming to an end. How did you kind of make that transition back home smooth in such a way where like you did land that job at ING with the law background? How did you convince them to do that? Because I think that's a lot of people have that struggle here in the US. Even they have the JD and then suddenly they're like, actually, I want to do investment banking, and it's very hard to kind of point to your CV.
Yes, I totally see how that's a hard pivot. And yeah, so if I can give one tip, ING is a place where like you can get your shot, even though you may have a bit of a non-traditional background. I mean, I'm a case in point for that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I had some time. That also helped. I took about 3 months to like go through the actual job search, and tried out different offices in different cities, had coffee chats at different bank branches. And it wasn't really a gap either, because at the time we had elections in the Netherlands, and I was volunteering with a campaign. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was doing something useful. I wasn't like sitting around doing nothing. So it worked out. I had some time to make sure I set myself up right.
Tell me about how you approached coffee chats for this stuff. So like it sounds like you were pretty open to going anywhere in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. fun fact, I went to the IFC and I wrote them a letter. I'll take the job anywhere. And they said, how about Egypt? That's how I ended up in Egypt. True story.
So tell me about, but tell me more about so we'll get there, but tell me about the ING experience. Was it similar? Were you having these coffee chats with people in all over the world, or how were you setting up these coffee chats?
I found that indeed it is hard. Like you were right. It is hard to beat the image of not being prepared. Do you actually have the skills for this?
Your CV probably screaming law. I mean, you had it undergrad. You then went to the masters.
They saw it and they were like, okay, he's been doing interesting things, and they invited me. But I mean, I flunked on technicals in certain interviews when they were really pressing. I got like to round 3 with ABN at their headquarters in Amsterdam at a commodities desk. Mainly because of that internship with a consulting firm in the oil and gas market. But I mean, they realized, okay, this kid is not up for the job, right? I mean, to be fair,
what were they quizzing you on? Just like basic oil markets, energy prices, stuff like that?
Well, I could get drivers, but as soon as you get to anything that requires some Excel work, valuations, I wasn't ready for that. I hadn't done it ever.
Yeah.
So I had to like really brush up on the theory. I realized that as I was applying for jobs, and eventually it did work out at the ING office in Zwolle, where they have they do corporate banking domestics.
Yeah.
For like the mid corporates, so the somewhat larger companies, but not the international multinationals.
Yep.
And they do that for like the entire northeast of the country. That office is in Zwolle, which is where I'm from. So I guess that also sort of
that probably helped.
Yeah, it helped.
Yeah, and so you were going to those interviews. It wasn't as technical. They had a training program. They put you through that type of thing.
Yeah. They. I mean, I had to indeed go through the whole training program, and I was being like monitored on results and attentiveness, but they gave me the shot. I think they reached the same conclusion as ABN did, but they had a different outcome.
That's great. I love it. So you're there for almost 2 years. Tell me about that progress from like when you first started. Was it an analyst, or are they calling you an analyst? Or they called you an associate because you've been doing stuff?
They called me an associate, yeah.
And so were you managing analysts?
No, I wasn't managed. No, it doesn't work that way. It's not the same as in the
US.
In the US, indeed. But yeah, I mean, if you want to equate it, I was an analyst, yeah.
Okay. And so how did you feel kind of those first 7 months or first 6 months? Was it really a struggle, or did you pick up the work pretty fast in terms of like the financial modeling, the valuation work? Were you put on deals right away? Were you pitching a lot? What was it like working there? And then how did you progress, and then why start kind of looking elsewhere?
Well, I think
it's a lot of questions in a row. Sorry.
Yeah. But I think I got pretty good at certain aspects of the job, and then as things go within firms, if they realize you can do something well, you tend to do mostly that. So it wasn't financial valuations. It wasn't a lot of modeling, especially those first 7 months. That's not what I was doing. I was very busy with searching databases, prospecting, identifying companies we could reach out to, making pitch decks. The relationship managers would take as they would like go out to those companies to see what kind of business we could do together. Liaise with ING corporate investments or the corporate finance teams, or if an entrepreneur wants to like retire and sell the firm, for instance. So a lot of that work, a lot of the less technical, more human aspects, I guess.
Yeah. And for sure, a lot of the pitch work, that's tough. It's a lot of heavy lifting. So were you like, after a year, were you like, okay, I can't keep doing this? Or what was your thought process in terms of thinking of your next step? So I know eventually you were on the phone with IFC saying, I'll go anywhere, which is how you ended up in Egypt. But tell me, in Cairo, right?
I wanted to leave like that badly. That's just to be clear. But I really wanted to go abroad is a short answer.
You wanted to travel again?
Yeah. I wanted the international experience. Wasn't necessarily aiming for the Middle East, but I mean, I was excited.
And so let's talk about that. So when did you start kind of looking for that job at IFC? Did you talk to any other firms, or was it, IFC was one of your first people you spoke, or, first jobs you applied to, and then you got it right away and just went? Or what was the that whole process, that job?
I knew I had to reach a certain point, right? So I knew because while I was in DC at the embassy, I met some people at IFC headquarters, a Dutch woman who was like very willing to like meet with me. And it's always good to find your own nationality, by the way. That's a tip for anyone listening, but find people that have the same background within that international scene, and they're willing to like put you on the bandwagon. But so she was very willing to like help, and she explained the process to me, and I learned that they do not hire straight out of school. So you need to reach like the 2-year point.
You're talking IFC in particular.
IFC doesn't really hire analysts that just graduated.
And can you tell me about that firm, like for people that aren't familiar with it? Is it?
Yeah, of course. So the IFC stands for International Finance Corporation, the private sector branch of the World Bank Group. And what they do is a lot of work you could also like explain as investment banking in emerging markets.
Yeah,
that might mean more to the people listening. So there's a development angle to the work. It's equity, it's debt, it's deals all over the world, but it's not just the returns that like get measured in terms of return on capital, like financially. It also gets measured in terms of did we create sustainable employment? Did we provide? Does the firm we invest in provide better wages? Things like that. So we try to measure a certain impact that helps emerging markets develop.
And so people who are really interested in like impact investing, this is like a dream job for them?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I mean, impact investing is like the broader umbrella, right?
Yeah.
For a lot of these. You also have PE firms that focus specifically on emerging markets. I work with those.
Yeah.
So
you guys were actually putting capital to work as well. You weren't just advising, but you were advising as well? Or like, is there a fund?
Yeah, there's advisory services as well. So you can think of, just to give an example, let's say you're investing in a date plantation in Tunisia. You could offer advisory services on better irrigation techniques, or you're investing in a company in.
Would you charge for that advisory services though? Like
yeah, it's a revenue stream.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because it's the private arm, right? So you're trying to actually make it sustainable and so like that. Is it still nonprofit?
No, it's not. It is profits. Yeah.
Or profit.
Yeah, if we would, let's say, put out loans and not make any profit on it, it would distort the existing financial sector.
Yep. Okay. And so tell me a little bit about just your progress there, because you were there for a little over 2 years. What was it like when you got on a plane and flew to Egypt? And or let's even before you got there, tell me about like what was your thought process when they said, okay, how about Egypt?
The process was long and complicated, and Egypt only became clear like very late in the process. I had to go to London to do a modeling test. Then I had to like a panel interview with Mumbai, India. Then at some point I had a video call with a senior investment officer in Jerusalem. And then I spoke with Cairo, and the last call was with Amman, Jordan. So I was very clueless till late, until I got the letter that said, okay, it's going to be Cairo. Yeah, it was interesting. But I mean, I really wanted to go. I wanted to do it. I said I would do it anywhere. So in a way, put your money where your mouth is, right? And then get on the plane and do it.
Got it. So you're kind of getting through this whole process. It sounded like there was a lot of rounds of interviews.
Yeah.
How do you feel like? What do you think was the most important thing that allowed you to kind of successfully get through all those rounds?
I think it's a combination of. I think the CFA is one. CFA program helped. At that point, I had cleared level 1, did very well. And they said, and in the end, they said, okay, you need to continue, obviously, but it's good you started, and okay, let's do it. Like, we'll offer you a contract. So that is a very important one. And I think, in your letter, if you are to apply, some affinity with development is very important, of course. And, the financial skills, but CFA would speak to that if you're busy with that program.
Yeah, that's great. So that combination kind of, you feel like, were the main reasons they extended you a contract.
Yeah.
Now, when they did extend you a contract, was this a pay raise or a pay cut coming from ING?
It depends on how you look at it, because the IFC is United Nations, so it's tax exempt on income at least. So I
Okay.
mean, the number is lower, but in the end, it's more. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So like paying you 70% of what you were making, but you're keeping all of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the way it works.
Okay. So do you mind giving us ranges in terms of what the pay of this type of role, like investment analyst at the IFC? Is it like, I'm not expecting it to be investment banking level pay in New York or something, but
I mean, it really, I can't say because it depends so much on where you are. So there is a range for DC. I wasn't working in DC, so I can't tell you. I'd be speculating.
yeah.
And there's a country adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
So I get less in dollar terms, right? Because in Egypt, everything is very, very cheap in a relative sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's less, but it's also not. It's not taxed. So
you could be making like 30 or 40,000 USD, but being like super rich there.
Yeah, that's fair to say. Yeah. I mean, it goes
not rich, but comfortable.
It would go a long way. I'm not sure what the rent is for a very decent apartment in Manhattan, but I can tell you the rent for a very decent apartment in like Diplomatic Quarters, Cairo. I don't know. I had a very good place for like $800-900.
Right. Okay. That's fair enough. That's helpful. Okay. So you're doing what type of work? Were you doing date farming advisory? Or what type
No, I wasn't. I was just picking that because a colleague did that, and it's a good, clear example. But I haven't done a date farm. No, that would be my colleagues. I did. I was working with a large agricultural poultry company in Egypt. 2 different glass companies also located in Egypt. Worked on an ophthalmology, that's eye care deal with a Saudi company looking to build a hospital somewhere in the Cairo area.
Mm-hmm.
Worked on like a PUT settlement, also with Saudi sponsors looking to sell their stake in an Egyptian company.
Mm-hmm.
Morocco, I've worked on the deal that unfortunately didn't make it. That happens too in Morocco. And I think the most important one, and my highlight was Yemen. Food security deal, a big investment in production of flour, sugar, and dairy products in Yemen.
Oh, cool. And so what was that like? You guys were helping kind of finance it?
Yeah. We were leading like a syndicate. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So you're doing all that work, and then now you're thinking, okay, now I can apply to business school.
Yeah, I think.
Or was it always like MBA? I want to do MBA in the US, or were you thinking going back to LSE potentially?
No, it was always the US. That was pretty clear. I mean, the IFC also states if you want to go on and be an associate investment officer, which would be the next step, an MBA is really going to help you. So they kind of nudge you towards the MBA already. They don't say do it in the US, but I mean, I added that myself. I really wanted to go to the US.
That's cool. And so tell me about that whole thing. You had to take the GMAT while you were abroad, or how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, if I was also in the Netherlands sometimes. One thing I can say about IFC is they put like this whole remote working concept and stretch it to the extreme, basically. Like I could be in the Middle East, technically, like my laptop would be registered or logged in from the Middle East, but I would be sitting in the Netherlands somewhere.
So yeah, and then you had COVID, right? So like, tell me, how was it? Like, were you flying back and forth a lot, or were you mostly in the Netherlands during lockdowns?
And I think, let's say if I had to put a percentage on it, I was in Egypt 60 to 70% of the time over the last 2.5 years.
It's pretty tough.
Yeah, I was here a lot too. I took all these CFA exams, so 2 and 3 in Amsterdam.
Okay.
I don't know, that just felt comfortable. I knew the place, so
yeah,
I didn't want to change that up.
That's awesome, man. So any final words of wisdom to either get into business school or just on your path? And I mean, it sounds like you might consider going back to do similar type of work, or what's your thought process for next steps?
Well, to be completely honest with you, next steps, going back is certainly an option. That would be great. I mean, I like this line of work, but development finance is broader, right? There are more players involved. There are also companies on Wall Street venturing into this space.
Mm-hmm.
Like JP Morgan started doing this in 2020. Not entirely the same role as the IFC is playing, but interesting nonetheless. I'll explore over the next 2 years. I guess that's the answer.
Do you know any other programs besides JP Morgan that are also doing more kind of, you're saying like impact investing type work or advisory work in markets?
Yeah, I know JP Morgan for a fact started the Development Finance Institute. They even called it the Development Finance Team.
Oh, cool.
In 2020, they started doing this. I think their goal is 100 billion to emerging markets per year. So it's like,
jeez,
it sounds like a sizable operation.
Yeah.
At least it will be as it ramps up. And other players, I know Actis is a private equity fund for infrastructure investments in the developing world, but I think they're London-based. I'm not quite sure, but
okay, it's called Actis. You said
Actis, yes.
Actis, sounds familiar. Yeah, that's great. And then any tips for getting into a top business school? Have a very interesting background like yours.
Well, yeah, I think that if you're like me and you know that okay, I can do 700 on the GMAT, but like I'll barely hit the mark, like I'll be just above it. I got 710 in the end. That's not going to be it for you. That's not going to be the factor that pulls you across the finish line. So yeah, try to spice up what you do. I guess do some interesting things, take some risks. I hope that helps.
I love it. Yeah, that's great. Really appreciate the time, Hans, that you took today.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was great being here.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, patrick@wallstreetoasis.com. Until next time.